kids have had over the years. So welcome to the July meeting. And I don't know how many of you still have lawn responsibilities, but with all this rain, I hope all your yards are green and you've got lots of work for you. Those of us who have moved into the condominium stage, we really envy you, haha. So sadly, I want to say that in June, the club lost 2 members. And Stan Burnup passed away on June 24th, and he'd been a member of our club from 2018. And Ward Maniale passed away also on June 24, and he was a member of our club, as you see there, from 2003 through to 16. And he provided as president in 06 and 07, 06 to 07, he provided administrative support for the computer interest group. So if you could please join me in a moment of silence for these 2 gentlemen. Thank you. So we're going to move immediately to our speaker, and I would ask Andrew Hallett to do the intro. Over to you, Andrew.
Okay, am I being heard?
Yes, you are.
Good, good. Okay, well, good morning to everybody. Dr. Chandras has addressed us about a year ago, I think it was, and caught our attention with his talk on artificial intelligence. And we're very pleased to have you back today, Dr. Chandras, to talk to us about human potential and the ascent of consciousness. What does that mean? Danged if I know. But I think he's going to talk to us about what we have achieved and what more we can achieve. Anyway, I'm looking forward to finding out. Dr. Chandras has a very impressive resume. I'm not going to try to give it to you all, but I'll give you some highlights. He's currently a senior scholar in residence at the Ted Rogers School of Management at Ryerson University, or whatever they're going to call it. And among other things, he's worked with seniors on the prevention of dementia, has done a lot of work in the area of female studies, and has served as academic dean for the Canadian College of Neuropathic Medicine. So welcome, Dr. Chandras. We're looking forward to hearing you.
Well, thank you. I'm currently with the World Health Organization. I was with the United Nations last year, working on global health initiatives. And that's my current role, as well as a lot of work with the Ministry of Long-Term Care. Last year, in Ontario, Ontario was the worst place to be as a senior in long-term care in North America, statistically. Did you know that? That we're worse than some kind of bumpkin city in Arkansas? Our fatality rates of seniors in long-term care. And then when the Canadian Army went in to visit, they found people in unrepeatable conditions, to say, or even no air conditioning. I would think air conditioning would be mandatory. Then the senior could turn it off or on, but apparently a lot of homes had no air conditioning. So we're working with the Ministry of Long-Term Care, currently training 8,000 in batches of 8,000 workers at a time to not screw up, because they screwed up bad. And a lot of it had to do with the way we teach and way we educate. And a lot of the battle I fight now is to try to get people to educate using what we know about neuroscience and modern, and they simply won't. They simply refuse. They're too stuck in their ways, and people have too many convenient salaries and positions to admit when they're wrong and see a new way of looking at the world. So similarly, and the consequences, of course, were devastating. Now that segues very much into what I'm talking about, because human potential and the ascent of consciousness, what I'm going to try to cover today is a couple of interesting topics. But when we talk about human potential, I want to just open with a little bit, a short video clip from Beck Weathers. In 1996 was the most dangerous year on Mount Everest. There were a number of people that died in a single night. The reason they died, they had very experienced guides with them. And I always look to mountaineering as one of the measures of human potential. Certainly, it takes extraordinary work. Jeff Lowe climbed the Eiger North Face solo in a few hours, directissimo. He went straight up the middle of it. He called it metanoia. And Jeff Lowe is a really interesting case. Before we look at Beck Weathers here, let me just understand how mountaineering might be a way to look at it. We're also going to look at it from the standpoint of love, because human potential seems most manifest in the form of love. That's where we seem to do our greatest work. We'll sacrifice our own lives in a heartbeat out of love. We won't do it for much else. I won't do it for a better guitar, but I'll sure do it for my own child. So human potential finds its outlets in places where they're least expected, not only in the heroic, but in the everyday. The heroism of a mother who has to face her child having leukemia or schizophrenia. That kind of courage is far greater to me than that required to take on a mountain. But Jeff Lowe is a fascinating story. Jeff Lowe was the best mountaineer of our century. And Jeff Lowe, I'm just going to, I'll cue this video up, so that we're looking at something interesting as I talk. And that's Beck Weathers. We're going to meet Beck in a moment. He was left for dead at the summit of Everest and made it back down, obviously. Lost most of his face and his fingers and toes doing so, but he lived. But Jeff Lowe started the sport of mixed rock and ice climbing. And, climbing started maybe in the 1700s, late 1600s. Nobody looked at mountains for most of human history. We found some corpses up at 10,000 feet that were probably some guy being hunted by a party of people that wanted to do him in. Fascinating story of Ollie, we call him. But the real mountaineering begins without, and so people get this quest for mountaineering about the same time that people start reading romantic literature. And then they get into Thomas Hardy and Return of the Native and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And then we move into Henry David Thoreau. This idea of loving nature, because nature was kind of horrible. It was the devil's playground. And it was only when the Protestant faith stepped away and established itself and brought in universalist and ecumenical practice that people began to look at nature, that you could actually find God in nature. That actually the temple of nature wasn't a man-made church, but the temple of nature was getting some land and working it. So this idea of nature makes mountains and oceans and other places that have been seen as horrific or necessary for trade. You're out in a whaling ship. Suddenly nature takes on a godlike quality, or is infused with a metaphysical property. And so people get really excited about climbing. And of course, alpinism, which begins in Europe, in the Alps, spreads to America and other parts of the world. Jeff Lowe in the 1970s is in the hippie movement. He's in the 60s and 70s. He's got long blonde hair. He's got a funky blonde mustache. And he's a part of the climbing crew that are accumulating at Yosemite, at Half Dome. And they're all living down in Yosemite or Joshua Tree. And this is kind of early hippie. So there weren't many climbers. You had to be pretty nutty to be a climber. And they became some of the best climbers in the world. They did stuff that you and I would be terrified. They were just like unbelievable free climbing. And Jeff became one of the best of them. And he pioneered mixed rock and ice. So he'd have crampons on, there'd be a bit of ice and he'd put it in it. And then he'd put his other boot on some rock and then use standard rock technique. And then there's ice, so he put in an ice screw, and he climbed Bridal Veil Falls, which is, I guess, a 1,000-foot waterfall or 2,000-foot waterfall in Colorado, I think Vail someplace. So he was really the best of the best. Now, what happens? So I would say that's human potential. Yeah, I would say, I would dare any of us to match one day of Jeff Lowe's life. Now, he's of my generation. I'm interested in Jeff Lowe because I'm interested in the outdoors and always have been. Well, one day he's with his granddaughter and he's skating and he takes a fall. And he says, that's odd. My balance, is usually pretty damn good. I'm Jeff Lowe. They said puts it off to nothing. Anyways, it starts deteriorating over time and they figure multiple sclerosis is the most probable diagnosis. But he doesn't develop MS-like symptoms. He develops over time progressive loss of everything but his mind. And it wasn't all ALS, which is the Lou Gehrig disease. It doesn't even fit that profile. There are neurological diseases that we don't know we don't know what is going on. we just watch you go downhill and we hope to God we can make you comfortable because steroids and other stuff. So that's what's happening to Jeff. So he starts going downhill progressively. He's at the point right now where he uses an iPad to communicate, and he can't use his hands, his legs, and he can talk, and just lost it all. But inside, he's Jeff Lowe, and they interview him in a movie called Metanoia, and this is why I put it together. The route he put up originally up the center of the Eiger, which is one of the hardest climbs in the world. It killed a lot of people before they made it to the top of the Eiger. It's a big rock face of, I forget how many thousand feet, but it's a bastard, it's a bastard. He called it metanoia. Now, the Greek word for metanoia is the Greek concept of improving yourself. The Greeks believed that you were born a certain way, but if you worked at it, you could be better. We take that for granted now. And in fact, I would say the younger generation now don't believe in metanoia, a lot of them. They believe in victimoia. The world has done me wrong, and they lack resilience. Their anxiety and depression levels statistically, their narcissism levels are really, really high. I don't want to sound like an older guy bashing the young, because the young are doing things I can't do. Some of them are breaking through with organic gardening and LGBT acceptance and reconciliation and social justice. But there is a certain resilience in the mindset that the Greeks were interested in. And there were some amazing scholars, but the word metanoia means to improve. So Jeff Lowe, they asked him at one point in his movie, which you can find for free on YouTube, called Metanoia, Jeff Lowe, L-O-W. You can watch it in 10 minutes, about an hour. And they asked him, what's it like to have been the best climber in the world? And now this. And he just smiles and says, it doesn't get any better than this. I'm completely happy. And he's serious about it. He adopted Buddhism when his travels to the Himalayas. And that Buddhism gave him strength to say, whatever is in front of us right now is the best thing that exists. Now, you might say, well, that might not be so in a concentration camp in Auschwitz. But Viktor Frankl would argue with you, who survived 4 concentration camps and was released by the Americans from Auschwitz in the end, having lost his entire family before him. He wrote a book, and started a whole system of psychotherapy in which he said, you have a choice in an Auschwitz camp every moment, whether to quit or to go on. He comes out saying, he who has a why can endure anyhow. Nietzsche, of course, is the great existentialist philosopher that talks about the chastening of the strengthening of character through suffering, that you can do what you want with it. And Epictetus, just staying in ancient Greece, before we come back to Jeff, Epictetus is someone you should read as well. Epictetus was widely read by the United States military in the 1960s. A number of Vietnam veterans who survived 6 or 7 years of brutal captivity had been trained in the philosophy of Epictetus. And Epictetus is kind of an amplification of Viktor Frankl's work that says, it's in your power. Whatever is in your power, do not give up. Use whatever power you have to make it through the next day. You decide what your attitude is going to be. The attitude is much easier to change than the world, which of course allows people to get through Hanoi Hilton, and people, highly decorated soldiers, came forth. I do one talk on, we do it on Remembrance Day, about heroism and the nature of the heroic in human, the millions of heroes we have, the unsung. So I think as we go into human potential, think of Epictetus, think of Viktor Frankl, think of the fact that human potential lies in your attitude, not in your abilities. For real. And I think we forget that a lot of times. We believe our circumstances dictate our happiness, and we're going to debunk that in a moment. Let's listen to Beck for one moment. Beck is a pathologist from California. He was left for dead at the summit of Everest. They just left him there. I mean, they were trying to save themselves. The 2 leaders of the expedition died. There's a movie called Everest you can rent, and it was kind of a reproduction of it. So, I mean, it was that bad. And then a Japanese woman died, and lots of people died. They died because there was a traffic jam. Everybody wants to climb Everest now to achieve their potential. So you get to Everest, it's not like the old day with Hillary and Tenzing, where there was just, you and the mountain. There's like hundreds of people in camps, all from different countries. Well, they all went up in the same day. So you had a lineup, like trying to get into Canada's Wonderland, going up to the summit of Everest. Well, there's one part of the summit called the Hillary Step. There's the first, second, and third step, and they are vertical climbs. And you're at 27,000 feet. You can't breathe hardly. And you got to climb a straight wall in climbing boots with a pack on. Good luck to you. But there's fixed ropes they give. So you can Jumar up the rope. So you're on the rope, but you got to wait for the guy in front of you to get ahead. And sometimes you've got people that have been at the top. Now they're coming down. Now that became a cluster, you know what. You couldn't move. You couldn't go low. You were looking at bodies of climbers that had died 2 years ago dangling in the ice beside you. A storm blew in and they were all stuck in that thing. And then they tried to get down and it was just hell. Now Beck was left for dead. Beck wakes up in the morning after the storm is passed. Like that, he wakes up is incredible. And he just tries to move and he can't. He's like Frankenstein. He's lost his gloves. You can see his hands here even years later. He's lost his gloves and he walks down Everest by himself in the storm. It's still a storm. It's not like, oh, it's sunny and it's time to move. It's a little improved, but he's got to get down. And descent is, well, you try it. Go to Vancouver, go up a mountain, get off the trail. Don't use the trails. Just go to the top and figure out, okay, how do I get back to Vancouver? I can see the lights over there. It's called a suicide trap. You get them all on the local mountains there where I've lived for years. People think you go down. You don't go down. Sometimes going down makes you, it's called a terrain trap. You go so down, but then you can't back climb up and now you're trapped in the terrain, and they do tons of rescues there in the local mountains, Mount Seymour each year. So Beck somehow gets down. And you know what gets him down? He thought about his wife and his children. And he said, I'm not going to die in this mountain. No, that's not going to happen. And somehow, at -20, he did it. Let me just make sure we can share sound. Technology burdens us with things there. I got to put share sound or you'll hear nothing. There we go.
Absolutely no later than 2, because if you're not moving fast enough to get there by 2, you are not moving fast enough to get back down.
He's saying that they left late for Everest. You have to get to the Everest, but like you got to be moving like 2 a.m. in the morning. Otherwise, it's going to be dark and horrible and you can't. So you got to get there 30, a minute or 2 at the top and get the hell down. And most deaths happen on descent. They don't happen getting to the peak. They happen when you try to get the frick back down.
Before darkness traps you on the mountain. And as you begin to ascend into the death zone, that part of the mountain above 25,000 feet, the stresses on your body are incredible. You're burning 12,000 calories a day. This means you're going to drop 3 pounds of solid body weight every day that you're up there. And water weight or Jenny Craig weight, I lost 30 pounds the last couple of weeks. That's not considered to be excessive. The thought of food is completely repugnant to you. And if you are able to force yourself to put food in your mouth, chew it, and swallow it, your body will not digest it. The work of breathing is so great. You blow off up to 6 liters of water a day through respiration alone, and the effort it takes to melt ice back down into water at low barometric pressures is such that you never catch up and you are constantly dehydrated. You no longer can sleep. The air hunger, the gasping, the drive to breathe is so great. You can rest, but you can never sleep. We get to the high camp late that afternoon. It's extremely cold. The wind is blowing very hard. And at some visceral level, I'm grateful because I know we can't climb in these conditions and I am hammered. And I think to myself, if I can just rest tonight, I am bound to feel better tomorrow than I feel right now. Intellectually, I know this is completely false because the whole point of the moment is to arrive here with just enough left to hit it and then get out of this place. Every second that you are up there, your body is literally dying beneath you. High camp on Everest exists at 26,000 feet in a saddle or a col that lies between Everest and Lhotse. It's the South Col, same route that Hillary took in '53. And of course, the mountain hadn't changed at all. And because of the shape of this narrow area, those jet stream winds that normally exist are compressed as they funnel through here, and it leaves a boilerplate of rock and ice. And the only thing that exists year to year are the discarded canisters of oxygen.
Now, we are going to come back to Beck Weathers. I am not going to leave you on a cliffhanger there. But I want to open up some other slideshows and start to look at some other aspects of human potential. I want to look at it now from the standpoint of happiness and contentment. We looked at it from the standpoint of heroism, and we'll keep coming back to that. But this is the era of Beck Weathers is in the in what I would call the field of physical achievements, which to me trump. But then you could look at the 3-minute mile, couldn't you? You could look at the Olympics coming this summer. You could look at karate champions. You could look at people in karate that can break through 30 or 40 boards. You can look at Shaolin priests who can lie on a sword and not be cut. We know them. I know one personally. He's a 34th generation Shaolin, and they can actually do all that stuff. And on and on. You get people that through visualization have cured themselves of cancer. Other people tried the same thing and died horribly. Paul McCartney's wife, Linda McCartney, was one who tried everything under the sun. So the idea of happiness as potential in us is an interesting one. So I've talked about one kind of potential, which is feats of strength, to quote Jerry Stiller from Seinfeld in Festivus. But we know that kindness is probably one of the higher parts of human potential. And we know these are all different studies which trace that have been done at overall effect size, and they're all significant. Anything beyond 0.5 at the bottom is a high effect size, which means there's a significant scientific basis for the claim in the paper that's been compared to someone, for example, that wasn't a kind. So the kinder you are, the happier you are. So happiness has absolutely nothing to do with your income. Now, poverty has absolutely everything to do with suffering, but that you can't reverse that and say the more money I get, the happier I am. That actually doesn't pan out. Happiness, which is, I'm going to talk about it in different research. I'm presenting it this way, but happiness is an element of what's called positive psychology. And that is having an attitude that gives you psychological potential. Not the potential to be a great mathematician. There is human potential that's genetic and inborn. There are chess prodigies that are 7 years old, no doubt about it. But I think for the average, what does my Scottish friend call him, a Muppet or whatever? The average Muppet like me, I'm no prodigy at anything. But as things I can do, and most of the things I can do, I'm limited by what my body can do. And as you age, you're limited more and more. Now, what happens is your motor neurons break down as you age. Your muscle fiber regenerate rates slow down as you age. Neural regeneration organs re-slows. So if you're 19 and you're mountain biking and you fall off a bridge and break your collarbone, you're back at it in a few weeks. It might be a year or two before you're really right once you hit a bit. And your sacrum fuses after the age of 40. So that means your tailbone actually fuses to the really tailbone, to the lower part of your spine. And so it limits your spinal mobility. That happens to everyone after age 40. And the they're saying, you're not making us feel very good here, Dave, Mr. Feelgood. The neurological conduction rate's slow, so that you're not as fast. So Mike Tyson gets in there. I mean, he's Mike Tyson, but if he got in there with a 22-year-old with equivalent training, he'd give Mike a good run for the money. And recently there was a boxing match between a 24-year-old YouTube guru and I forget the name of the boxer. He's one of the best. He's the best in the world. And this YouTube kid held his own against the boxer because he's 20 years younger and he's watched a lot of YouTube videos and learned how to box on YouTube. It's inflaming for me, but actually he pulled it off. Like he got beaten technically by Evander Holyfield. It's not. I've got to get the right name, but so we're going to talk about the mental shift here. So as you can see from the slide I've had up, is about half of your happiness is controlled by your thoughts and behaviors, 10% by your circumstances, and 50% is genetic. So if you're born to be a bummer, you're a bummer. I'm born with the blues. I'll be honest with you all. I was born with the blues. I don't have a diagnosable depression, but I'm damn close. And I like it. That's why I talked about people like John Daly and David Faraday. They admit their weaknesses. David Faraday admits he fights with depression. So fighting with depression is a form of heroism, but in our society, if there's too much machismo, that would be seen as a weakness. I'm not sure how they would treat you in prison, but I know in prison rules, you're not supposed to run around too weak. And kind of eye contact and shift away like you're afraid. You're supposed to carry yourself with a certain kind of respect. And that respect comes in the American view with the American dream helper. So you become happy by adding money, and we'll all end up at, you know, Pebble Beach and really, really happy. There's some data I'm just going to shoot through very quickly, but income and happiness levels seem to aggregate in the United States, and they also seem to correlate with life satisfaction. So what really is happening when you become happier through income? What is it that makes me, there's disparate data. One of them shows, and it's coming in a slide later, but I'd rather jump on it now. They looked at a group of people that were paraplegic, and the same time they looked at a group that had won the lottery, and they compared them for 2 years. And the paraplegics were just as happy as the lottery winners in 2 years. So happiness is something that's kind of fleeting and situational. I'm going to make these slides a little bigger. I'm able to do that here. But if you're at work, for example, and if you're happy, then your productivity can double. I mean, well, 50% increase. Sick days are down, more energy, more engaged. Doctors do their work faster. Sales are up by 33%. But nobody cares much about happiness work, do they? The Milwaukee Nun study, it showed that 90% of happy nuns were alive at the age of 85. Only 33% of grumpy nuns were alive at the age of 85. So people that have a positive attitude will outlive you and outperform you. And people that have a boss that's not an arse will do better. Arse bosses have to be fired and identified and routed out of the system really, really rapidly. And you can define them now because we know generally how we're treated. So progressive institutions, no matter, even if you don't get along with your supervisor, let's say at Ryerson or Humber College or, you know, some major accountable entity like the Ministry of Health or something, there are certain rules of conduct to keep employees engaged. Kabansky's work at Harvard showed that a bad boss should give you a heart attack. Happiness, if you had a good boss that you worked with. So a lot of what we do to make money sets the stage for the potential we have in life. The lottery winning paraplegics, this was Dan Gilbert's Harvard study done about 10 years ago. 2 years later in life, lottery winners are only marginally more happy than the paraplegics. You know what happens with money? You win the lottery for $1 million. Well, they claw back what 300 or 400 grand in tax. You're going to buy a place on the bridle path for 600K. You're not going to buy a toilet for 600K. You want to live in the annex, it's going to cost you 4.1. If you're going to get to Rosedale, you're at 8.1 now. You know, the average kid has to save for 40 years to get a place in North York right now. So money is not really going to get you there the way you think it's going to do. And so we end up, however, believing it's true, and we end up in what's called a hedonistic treadmill. And that was that the mind starts playing tricks on you, saying, I will be happy when I get this new guitar. And we can't help it. And it's dopaminergic driven. It's driven by a certain neurochemical called dopamine. And the idea, the way the brain works is the levels of dopamine drop and drop and drop as you get further and further, and you get more and more excited. I'm sorry, the levels increase. My bad. Levels of dopamine start increasing as you move toward fulfillment of an object. And so you go to Ajax and you hit the casino and it's going ding, 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 ding. And when you get that final ding and you get a payout of $35, then your dopamine levels suddenly drop. Your dopamine levels you get a big rush of dopamine right there. It's at meat level. So looking forward to your next meal, if you're driving home and you're really hungry and you're going to have something you want, your dopamine starts going up in your pleasure and reward centers. It goes up in the part of the brain called the basal ganglia. And that's of interest because Michael J. Fox and other people that have Parkinsonism shake a lot. And so basal ganglia is what's affected in those illnesses. So we thought it was a motor center, but that's actually where your reward centers are in your brain. And that's where a lot of this dopaminergic circuitry is. Very interesting. It's called reward adjustment. So when you get to your meal, you eat your good meal. Well, then you go down right away and then you bum out. And you want something different. You want some dessert. And now you want something to watch. And now the TV's broken, the internet's down. So now you're pissed off because you don't have that. And then you get that and you start bitching about something else. And that's how humans are. We're just built that way. The Buddha had a solution. He said, stop whining so much and start living. Be content with the fact that you're going to lose everything. So what do you do knowing you're going to lose everything, including all those you love and your own life? I know you can put it off and distract yourself and say, I don't want to think about death. I'm going to be positive and happy. But in the back of your mind, it's always ticking, especially past the age of 50. It's going. And for some people, it takes over and becomes a form of depression. But other seniors in Asian countries and in all over the world, but Asian countries, I would point out, where they have an idea of mastery in life, you end up with martial arts masters who are in their 80s way better than they were in their 70s. So you can get better at the age of 90 at stuff. Now, maybe it doesn't mean you're a better fighter. Maybe a 25-year-old kid would knock your block off, but that's not what we're talking about. There is an art of karate. There's an art of Aikido. There's an art of Tai Chi. There's an art of bow and arrow called Kyusho. There's an art of flower arranging for women. There is an art of tea ceremony. And they are lifetime arts that you get better at. And you're way better at 90 than you were at 80. And you're way better at 80 than you were at 60. I have to say, my friends, the Western culture doesn't have that, but because it abandoned its roots, which is the Greek philosophy of metanoia, being a better you. So those of you that are with me today that have worked to make your life better are benefiting from the Greek heritage of metanoia, which also became a Christian kind of philosophy of bettering yourself for the service of humanity or for whatever. So we know that getting more stuff doesn't make you happy, but the dopamine. You know, this is how much money we're earning now, and this is our happiness level, and they can measure happiness. There's thousands of papers that do it. There's all kinds of ways of measuring it directly and indirectly. It came from the field of organizational psychology. But we're not so interested just in happiness. We're looking at potential. But I would say your potential to not kill yourself is a pretty important potential. You have to have a reason to move on, and you've got to be happy in life. And that's where people like Beckwether survived. He had something worth living for. Look at this. We make more and more money, but we're no happier in general. And you know, this has to do with your explanatory style. This is where your potential arises from. The difference between some of us and the Olympic athlete is just in this slide. The pessimist says, and pessimism comes from Arthur Schopenhauer. He invented the word. He's an existentialist philosopher, and it's a system of philosophy that says, we don't know if there's a God. We don't know why we're here. We just seem to be here. I don't know what to do with my life, but when I play music or entertain myself, it gets better for a while, but we're all going to die and it sucks. It just basically, it's no good. That's existentialism. It goes through Sartre. It goes, you know, and people try to struggle with if there's no God, what do? Does it mean the biggest son of a bitch with the most guns is in charge? And that's really it? No, thank you. I'll take the bullet. But the existentialists began to say, you know what? Even without God, there can be a reason to live. And Nietzsche says, yeah, you can be the best you can be each day, much like the ancient Greeks said. So the pessimist says, things go wrong. Love just doesn't come my way. When something goes well, it was one off. It wasn't me. You know, sometimes things go well. You all know people like this. You may have been this person at times. The optimist says, when something goes wrong, I did my best. When something goes well, yeah, usually does. You know who are more optimistic? Christians. I'll start with close to home, and then we'll include it to what we know, churchgoers. I don't know if people went to Indonesia and look at churchgoers in Indonesia, but churchgoers and people that have had religious conversions are way happier than people that are atheists. That's not always true. There are many atheists that find a meaning in life using this optimistic explanatory style. But if you want to pretty well wake up each day and whistle and say, I'm loving life, get to church. And I'm not being Christian with you. All the studies have done, tons of studies have shown people that attend church regularly have somebody that says, how you doing each week? Just, you know, let's have a cup of tea. It's after the service that most of the good stuff happens. And the ministers know that, the good ones. Now it's time to hang out and plan what we're going to do on the weekend. Let's have a talent night. Somebody gives a shit that you bashed your car and you can't drive that week. There's somebody that cares other than your friend who gets to hear it every damn day. So being with each other brings out our best potential. It can also kill us. There's studies from northern Denmark where people, it's dark all day, and the Netherlands and Sweden, and they all have to live indoors for the winter, and they hate each other. So sometimes being alone. But what we can learn is a positive explanatory style. You will put your best potential if you're positive. And it doesn't mean looking in the mirror and saying, I'm not a dirty little scum. It means connecting with other people. And this goes back even 10 years ago. You've got to have other people. We discovered this in COVID. You know how you get other people? You can get them on YouTube. You can get on YouTube and watch certain people each day. There's a lot of people that podcast their lives every day on YouTube, and it makes you feel connected. You might live way up in, Elliott Lake, and you don't know anybody and you just moved up there. But if you watch YouTube, these daily vlogs of a guy living in his van or somebody going on a hike across North America, every day he posts a half an hour of what he's doing. And then you make comments and use social media. Happy talk is so important. Kant lives on Won't Street. It's a line from an old great movie. We know that the brain is not designed for multitasking. When we have too much to do, we get blown away. So mindfulness is another episode toward, mindfulness is just being aware of your surroundings and where you are. It also involves using your imagination. And we're really crappy at using our imagination in North America compared to the Chinese. The Chinese are someone to watch in the world. You may have whatever feelings you want about the Chinese government. I've got mixed. They do social monitoring. I'm talking about the government. I'm talking about people who are born of Chinese, of the race. But China does some very, very interesting things. And you'll get thousands of people doing Tai Chi in the park, of seniors. In the morning, just everyone goes out and just does Tai Chi. It's not, oh, I've joined up Tai Chi, I shall give it a try. It's like you do Tai Chi. They talk to trees. They believe that trees have a certain energy. And Jordan Peterson, controversial figure, but amazing psychologist, they asked him whether you believe in God. And he said, I don't know, but I live as though there were a God. And he has a whole book called Man's Search for Meaning, written by Viktor Frankl. There's another book on meaning, mythology and meaning, that Peterson wrote over 8 years, which looked at how we find meaning in our life. And he turned to the scriptures again. So yeah, Muslims and Jews and practicing Shinto and Taoists and First Nations, anybody that's really following a faith seems to be happy. And people that are moving out and are moving their body, and we move our body in stupid ways sometimes to win. What's the difference between you and an animal? We're starting to wind down in our discussion now. We're going to stop in the next couple of minutes. You see, this is a big topic and it takes more than an hour. Properly, this is a 2-hour lecture, and maybe I should have asked for that. But we can't always get what we want. Mick Jagger. What's the difference between you and an animal? Well, one of the differences is that we have a prefrontal cortex, so we can simulate experiences in our mind. We don't think chimpanzees can simulate what the Guggenheim would look like if they built it in the Congo. Experience simulators means we simulate experiences in our head before we do them in our life. We don't think about onion flavored ice cream because in our mind, we think we're not going to like it, so why try it? Let's take a quiz. Contemplate. Do you win a lottery or become a paraplegic? What do you want to do? Our experience simulator kicks in and we says, we want to win the lottery. Of course, who wants to become a paraplegic? The statistics I showed you, after 1 and 2 years, you are no happier in either group. That's called an impact bias. It means that we have a tendency to overestimate the hedonic impact of future events. The mind works in short term. And it also, it can, the point is that Beck Weathers was only upset for 3 months that he lost use of his hands and legs as a doctor. So we want synthetic happiness, metanoia. What they did, one big study I want to finish on. I feel like there's 100 things I want to talk about, and I hope questions and answers will let us explore mind over body, psychoneuroimmunology, psychosomatic medicine. There's so many areas of faith healing, placebo we can go into. But I'm one where I was going with that before I got excited. The idea of changing your attitudes and values is so important. In last year, that Roland Griffiths' work at Johns Hopkins, Griffiths has been doing some incredible work with the use of psilocybin. Psilocybin is a psychedelic agent found in magic mushrooms, which have been used by hippies and have been used by shamans all over the world. Well, they've been used therapeutically in clinical trials now for over 10 years, all over, in very respectable labs. And psilocybin is 300 times more effective than any other antidepressant. Now, it's only given once or twice. You don't take it every day like Zoloft. You take it once and you have psychotherapy, and then you take it again. And people that nothing else has helped are helped with psilocybin. So something about, now what psilocybin operates on are what are called the 5-HT2 beta receptors in the brain. So there's a chemical called serotonin in the brain, and there's different types of receptor places where serotonin can lock onto. These specific receptors produce infant mind. And what that means is you change your view of the world so that you don't, all of us have a filter by which we view the world. All Jews are greedy. All blacks are full of crime. All natives just drink all day. All white men are colonialists. Now, I could say that to you, right? In university, they might take me out of context. The point I'm saying is that we have a filter we set up the world that makes you racist son of a bitch. Now, you can get rid of that racist son of a bitch with 2 psilocybin sessions. But you know what else got rid of it? Roland Rivers last year? Religious conversion. He was looking at our primary attitude adjustment and depression, and people that became followed a religion very quickly, maybe became a Buddhist or a Christian, who had a conversion where they were really converted. They didn't say, well, I'm going to go to church, you know, thank you, God, I got through the surgery. Sometimes they had something called post-traumatic growth disorder. So they might have cancer and it's over. They find a new lease on life. But these folks actually used religion to get to it. So synthetic happiness, then, we can conclude, is some kind of ability that we have to instantly change how we view a situation. And that's hard to do. And the older you get, the more opinionated you get. I'll leave you with one last interesting tidbit, and then we'll let Beck Weathers finish for us. And then let's open it up. You know how you vote? Whether you're an Aaron O'Toole guy, or whether you're a Jagmeet Singh, or whether you're a Trudeau, or whether you're a Green Party, or what have you. You know what determines your vote? Your genetics. Guaranteed. You don't believe me? Go to Google Scholar, not Google, Google Scholar, and put in neuropolitics. Look at all publications in the past 5 years. You'll be reading for the rest of the month. Now, whether you vote for Peter, now you could vote for Peter MacKay, who's a more liberal, perhaps, than maybe Stephen Harper was. So you might still choose conservatism because you like the person. And Peter MacKay, is a pretty liberal person. He's married to a Persian woman. He's not what you'd call a redneck by any means. Very progressive thinker. I've met him on several occasions. But your tendency to go for Trump versus Clinton is genetically driven. So we have genetic drives, and we have to somehow have, through metanoia, overcome those drives. And one of those drives is tribalism. We could talk about the anti-Semitism in the world, high levels of anti-Semitism, record levels of anti-Semitism in the world right now. Amazing, the alt-right, the neo-Nazis, Ku Klux Klan. It's right here in Canada. Go to Oshawa, you can meet them. How do you change that? To me, that's a more interesting potential question than whether I can do a 4-minute mile. But they're both connected to a lot of these related concepts. Let's finish with Beck. I'm almost tempted to skip that and get right to the questions. But let's go right to the questions, because I think you got a taste of Beck Weathers and what he has to contribute. I'd like to open it up to you, because I'm sure there's a lot of, how do you improve your baseball swing? It's all, it's a big topic. And the ascent of consciousness that I guess I would just say, what does this got to do with ascent of consciousness? I think I tried to tell you that once you become a better you inside, you achieve that potential, and you get it through love and community. You don't get it through being the best of the best. That's not going to last for long. You're going to get the best out of you when you're doing it for someone else. That's a pretty good message. I think most religions have said that, have they not? I think they've tried to. I want to turn it over to Ken or somebody to moderate this.
Yeah, okay, well, that's great. Thank you, Dr. Chandros. And we will open it up to questions.
Yeah.
And so the way we do this is when you have a question, you raise your hand. Gary will see you and unmute you, and you ask your question. And as soon as you've asked your question, go back on mute. So let's start off. That's great.
And if there are a few, I've got 10 other things I want to tell you about. So no lack of stuff here.
Okay, I think Brian Patrick had the first question. Go ahead, Brian.
Well, actually, a question and a comment, and I guess the comment is, wow. I mean, this was very amazing information to have, and it's almost so complex. You think, how do I break it down? But it seems to me it's one of the problems we have in society, and it seems to be in almost every country, is that this depends upon individual strengths, and you have to build the strength. It's not something that comes to you, and you build the strength yourself through research, through experience, through interactions with other people, through exploring other things. At the same time, you're being bombarded daily with negative thoughts and information. And I guess the magic thing, because you're always wanting to become educated too and learn new facts. But I find most days, at the end of the day, I've had enough of the news. I've had enough of the facts. Is there a strategy other than the 5 or 6 possible you've said, given that I have a limited amount of time left in my life, to start this again, to really strengthen internally?
What a great, fabulous question. Let me respond to them, and if there's with brevity, it's to give us all a chance to review. And I'll certainly follow up with you after this meeting. I'm happy to share for you to share my email address, and I'm certainly willing to help people beyond this. I would say news fasting is essential. I don't think the news serves its function that it once sold. Where did news begin? It began in the Greek civilizations with bards, and bards would go from city to city singing what had happened. So they were like singing newscasters. Now they're fashion models. They're airbrushed. I would say news fasting is really the best. I don't think there's a bit of information in the news that's helpful. Keep a mask on, get your shots, don't be a dork, and eventually population will simmer down. It has done it for 10,000 years. The Antipodean plague in Greece lasted 15 years. So we're doing pretty damn good. By historical standards, this is the most successful, by North American standards, by Canadian standards, the most successful campaign we've ever seen. So I think we can rest assured that we're kind of on top of COVID. And once in a while, you can check in and find out, geez, can I go to the theater yet? Can I bring my wife? So the COVID story is closed. If you're going to watch every day to see how Lambda is spreading, who the hell cares? You know, what are you going to do about it? What you're going to do is get vaccinated. If you don't get vaccinated, well, you know, I'm not going to bash anybody here, but that's another story. We're going to do, so I don't see why you need the news at all. I don't really care. Maybe let me know when there's an election and I'll have a listen. And maybe I want to go in person anyways and talk to them. I go to events, I'll talk to Carolyn Bennett, or I'll talk to the Green Party leader. And to be honest, some of them are creepy in person. I think, I don't want to vote for you. You're a creep. So news fasting. Now, there's the second step of the metanoia of the process. What I would do is adopt a paradigm what's called mastery. And mastery is finding a discipline that improves over time. And even on the days that you don't feel like doing it, you do it. So for me, martial arts is the way to go. And there are hundreds of martial arts. Tai Chi, you can do by yourself. But there might be golfing. It might be that golfing is your martial art. Because golf, who knows? So I think the idea of a path of mastery, you know, the problem with golf is it has no basis other than it's a sport. Tai Chi is not a sport. There's no competitions. The idea is to become a master of yourself and a master of your consciousness. Once you introduce competition, you get some chest thumping. And once you're thumping chest to see who's the better man, lower parts of your nature take over, and suddenly winning is more important than you doing your best game. If playing with other people brings you to your best game, then you're getting it all in that one shot. So you probably have stuff in your life right now, but you must master something. If you're not mastering something, you're going down. We're going to go downhill physically. But if we master something, we'll be better in 10 years. Other questions, Wade? I think someone's a moderator, which is probably Gary.
Yeah.
Gary, yeah.
I think Andrew had a question as well.
Gary, you're moderating, right?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Andrew,
Okay.
yes, Andrew Hallett?
Andrew, do you have a question, or I can go to Kevin? Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah,
John's had his hand up for a couple minutes.
David. Can you- David?
I can hear you very well. Yes.
Yeah, okay. This is sort of a general question. I was when I was in the States there, I read an article in the New York Times. I don't know if you read the New York Times, and it talked about the difference between calendar age and biological age.
Yeah.
So it talked about how it varies so widely, and they gave
Yeah.
some statistics which were really weird. Well, they were amazing, and they said that some people age in a year, sorry, their biological year is 0.4 of their calendar year, right? So you age 0.4 of the normal calendar year. And then there are other people who age at 2.5 times their biological year in a calendar year. So they're getting old really, really quickly. And some other people are not getting old because something's going on. So my question to you, David, and you've probably done the research, is how do we get to the 0.4 or better? You have any ideas? Because I want to live to 100.
Oh man, no, that's $1 billion industry called life extension. It started in the 80s. People began to experiment with human growth hormone, fasting, keto diets, using supplements, and these people fell dead while they were driving. People that went to the gym every day, gym rats, like people that are up every day. I happen to know people at McMaster University, so really high level professors that every morning, they never missed a day at the gym, and they were like there every day at 5. Doctor looked at them and said, "You're going onto the table today, doing a quadruple bypass on you." We don't have those magic formulas. All we have is what Viktor Frankl gave us, that we can change our mental course of aging. Conor McGregor, who's one of the best, he just got his leg broken this week fighting in he's a mixed martial artist. These guys are interesting to watch, you know. As a traditionalist in martial arts, I poo-pooed it as cockfighting, you know, brutal. But the mixed martial arts, get in there. It's like we get in there and we're going for it. We're not going to kill each other, but somebody's going down. And like their injuries while they're training are horrible. They have a lot of courage and a lot of resilience, and they do the impossible. So Conor McGregor says that timing beats speed, and precision beats power. So what happens with aging is that we develop new sets of skills that compensate, and the nervous system and the muscles can compensate in other ways. You can punch someone by lifting weights for a year till your arms are this big, and use the sheer amount of muscle mass to generate, you know, a real, Joe Louis kind of. But you can get a little Japanese man who's 110 pounds, and he can hit you right here. And he's fast and little, so you can't even catch him. He's just this little guy running in circles around you, and you're with your big paws. He hits you once here, it's over. You're not breathing anymore. It's over. And that's what any special forces. You use intelligence, Krav Maga, the Israeli fighting system. So I hate to be so graphic, but you can be extremely efficient, even at something like defending yourself at 80, and beat someone who's younger by being smarter. So what doesn't seem to reverse is mastery. There's something in us that keeps growing, and that's called learning. We can continue to learn, and we learn differently. We don't learn as fast, but we learn more profoundly because there's more neural connections, so that what we learn connects to a wider body of knowledge. So people in their 60s and 70s in politics are damn better than people in their 20s. Even though the 20-year-old politician looks good, believe me, Joe Biden, with time in the job and all the ageism that we've heard about him, well, he's going to die anyways. Ha, ha, ha. No, Joe Biden has been around. Like him or not, Donald, whether you like him or not, he's paid his dues. He's been around. We've all been around. And so our learning progress is deeper, faster, and therefore our mastery curve is accelerated. That's the great news. And with that, you can learn to do a lot of physical stuff by being smart. One of the things I'll give you is breathe through the mouth, through the nose at all times. Even if you're taking a bike and you're cycling uphill, keep your mouth shut, because it changes the way nitrous oxide vasodilates and oxygen uptake in the system. So little tricks like that give you the edge. Next question. You can rock it. You can become the next black belt.
Dave, you got a question?
Please. Poor John. John Pilling is.
Let me turn myself.
Hey,
Yes.
thank you, man.
Back
David.
in 2016, I asked a very wise young man, why would Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton? And his comment back to me was, Americans are really unhappy. And that sort of parallels what you say, but the question I have is, what in the world makes Americans genetically unhappy?
Well, that's a complex issue that has to do with tribalism. And Yuval Noah Harari from Israel is an Israeli academic. He's written some great books, Sapiens, Homo Deus. You can find him everywhere. He's probably explains history. Human beings have narratives. So our whole life is set up as a story. And we learn everything through stories. So what happens in the United States is there's a story, a national narrative that is diverse, but has some central themes. Unhappiness levels, to be honest, are not highest in the United States. They're highest in places where there's generally war and snipers shooting at you when you go out for water. So for example, Bosnia-Herzegovina, all through the 80s, won the most horrible place to live in the world because of the Serbian Tigers, death squads, etc. So the happiness, and Canadians rank relatively happy, so do Americans. But the discontent is what you're getting at. There's an incredible power in your question, Dave, and we don't want to lose the center of your question. Where does that discontent come from, that if we elect a leader, somehow our lives will be better? And maybe that's a fallacy. Maybe you can elect any random leader you want, but if you take responsibility for your own life, here's a case where it didn't matter. Preserving American wilderness happened under Trump. The Americans and Democrats and Republicans, which you didn't read about, but I follow these things, they have bipartisan committees. And they're polarized, of course, you know. But they had a committee and they said, you know what? We got to make up a way to protect our national parks and nature because we're going to lose them and we might lose them to climate change and all this. And we got it. So they went to the right wing. The Democrats started getting the ball rolling, start talking to the Republicans and say, yeah, and the Republicans say, you know what? I love hunting and fishing. And we're gun rights people and we're hunting and First Amendment. And we like the idea of going back to the land and being homestead, not the government telling us what to do. Yeah, we'll support you. Trump signed legislation on a bipartisan agreement to protect all of America's national parks. And you know who's going to pay for it? Big oil. They all agreed. Big oil companies said, yeah, because we like hunting and fishing and camping and hiking too. They all found something they agreed on. They all like nature. The Republicans and the Democrats produced long-standing legislation. And we will see this legislation continue into the future, all paid for by giants like Exxon. So there's a beautiful story going on behind the scenes. It's like I used to tell people that Stanfield and Trudeau used to go for pints together after the House of Commons and say, man, you got me on that one. Yeah, you bastard. Here, I'll buy it. I'll buy the round tonight. So the tribalism is what you want to decrease rather than the, that's going to give more happiness. You're going to find out that the Trump supporter and the Clinton supporter actually have much more in common than they do apart. But social media, which I would say avoid, is an echo chamber. And it amplifies the smallest thing. You know what it amplified? The idea that you need 8 glasses of water a day. It's complete poppycock. You don't need 8 glasses of water a day. You just be peeing all day. That's all you'll do. You wonder why you have to pee all the time? It's not your prostate. It's because you're drinking too much goddamn water. You know where it came from? There was a 20-year-old kid that went and took a weekend course on fitness and put it up on Facebook and Instagram. And people started copying it, but they forgot who said it. And then all of a sudden, everyone's learning that you got to have 8 glasses. And now people are walking around with these freaking water bottles. They look like infants. Somebody's standing on the bus and he's got what do you need a water bottle for? You're on the bus for half an hour. So please understand, social media is demonic evil. I teach in the Faculty of Communication and Design at Ryerson. I teach courses who are doing digital media and social media degree. They all say, my students doing masters, get the hell off of Facebook and social media immediately. And your whole life will suddenly take a turn for the better. Okay, next. No, I'm not off it, but that's what my students tell me to do.
How are you doing for time?
Let's give it a couple more seconds.
Okay. John, you had a question.
Well, it's a question, but it's also picking on David, which I really don't want to do. He's way his arms and hands go around, I'm liable to get clobbered. Anyway, going back to senior homes. I lost 2 beautiful people, golfers, last year. One of them was in a home here in Burlington. The other one was in a home in Mississauga. And I've been in those homes. And the one that he died in, I was in. And there's a lady that I have right now in one. She's 100 years old. And she'll wake up in the morning to go to the bathroom and she'll notify them because she has to be put in a wheelchair, wandered off to the bathroom. She sat one day for 2.5 hours waiting for a body to take her to the washroom. When you say we have to correct this, and they bring in the army and all the rest of it. It's the owners of the buildings, of the senior homes. Do they not get ridiculed or chastised or blamed for any of this?
I think there are some initiatives that are doing that are coming from CARP. It's coming from the groundswell. And I absolutely agree that there is that has to happen in all those levels. The area that I've been asked to work in, and I would probably work on that level if I could, but I've been asked to work in getting people retrained so that while they're in the home, they're giving good care. And I'm not in charge of that at all. But I think you're absolutely right, John. It is it falls, the buck stops somewhere. And you know what? There are retirement homes that were really, really good through it all. The retirement homes did well. So if you're in a retirement home like LaSalle and Burlington, you're doing good. Well, I love LaSalle. I think it's one of the best places I've ever seen. They did well, as did many of the chains. Who didn't do well were the poorly managed tertiary care. Once you have dementia, you move into the tertiary care. And that's, we would call it a nursing home in the old day, but it's called long-term care of the frail elderly. And that's where you're absolutely right, John. I can't argue with the thing you're saying. That's where the buck stopped. And I'm terrified of what happens if it doesn't change.
Do you find that when a senior home is owned by someone like Chartwell, who has several homes, and they're all fantastic,
Yeah.
and you won't find 2 out of 12 homes COVID cases
Yeah.
in those homes owned by Chartwell. You know, the biggest homes with the problems are government owned. True.
Well, I think, John, I think we could explore this a lot more. Our time is a little limited. But I
Yeah,
think you said something that's really important. There is an information campaign on the classical FM dial that I listen to all the time in my car. Beautiful music for a crazy world. CARP and others are putting together very serious initiatives to say, Ford, you didn't do enough. To put more pressure on the government. The sense I got is that Ford didn't know what was going on when he found out he was furious. And there's been fast and furious movement in the ministry. And there was a lot of people that have lost their asses over this. And I don't think Ford is the type of fellow that's going to let go of this. Say what you will about him. He was shocked at what the military revealed. He was shocked. And he himself is on the other side of 50 and has family in these homes. So when the government gets energized about this, and he's got his Ministry of Health people, and I know his ADM. Helen Angus is the assistant deputy minister to the Minister of Health, Christine Elliott. And I know that there's some really, really good people in there now. Like they're not going to take this down. So let's hope, because by the time I get to one, I do not want the crap that I've seen in some cases. No, luckily I work in the good sector. I think we have to wind it down a little bit. And I'm going to a meeting that I don't even think they want me at or I need, but I'm invited to each week because they discuss stuff and they usually say, go away, we don't need you. So I feel kind of ridiculous leaving anyhow. But I wondered if there was maybe one other question or so. Maybe I should go. I don't know what to do. But if there's something burning, we could finish on that note and draw it together. But I guess one thing I wanted to ask about is that physical potential. There is a science called psychoneuroimmunology, and it studies mind and body. And there are people that when they get sick, if they've got a good attitude, especially with things like multiple sclerosis, they remarkably improve a lot. People that say, God damn it, this thing's got me, they go downhill. But there are other people that vow to get better and die anyhow. There are people that don't think anything about it and live for 13 years. I've seen people live with pancreatic cancer for 10 years after the diagnosis, and they're past the age of 80. It's supposed to die in a couple months with the thing. And they were there 10 years later. I've seen people that smoke their whole life and drink every day, and they're healthy and happy. A lot of these old Japanese karate guys smoke and drink every night. So none of the prescriptions that we have seem to make sense. One thing we do know is there's differences. We know that there's a chemical in the blood called it's called COMT. It's a methyltransferase. It's an enzyme that we find in our bloodstream, and there's two versions of it, depending on what your genetics are. The one version of those people have high pain tolerance. The people, and the one has had an amino acid at the end called methionine, one has leucine at the end. And I forget which one, I always forget which one is which. But let's just say, and for the sake of argument, the methionine guys, they get in and they give them a placebo, a sugar pill, and then they do a root canal. And he says, man, doc, that was great. Didn't hurt a bit. And they send him home with some fake codeine. And he says, oh, the codeine's great. Yeah, doc, feeling real good. Now you take another person who's got leucine on their COMT enzyme, and that's genetically determined. And they're screaming, what are you doing? The placebo is doing nothing. They get home and they're in agony. What did you give me? This is crap. I'm still in pain. I'm up all night. That's genetic. So we know that pain tolerance is genetically determined. I don't have a lot of pain tolerance. I would not do well under investigation and interrogation. I would crack probably quickly when they pulled out a pointy object. The Captain Vale, the pirate that would torture his. Other people would just think of their. I know a guy, when he gets his teeth done, he goes to his happy place. He imagines he's traveling, and they go. He just smiles and he says, oh. He says, you should learn to do this. I said, I can't learn to do it. We have a different genetic body. So realize that our power to do the impossible is genetic. And maybe Beck Weathers had the genetics to survive extreme cold. So all you can do is be a Viktor Frankl, whistle a happy tune, and decide to be metanoic. Be like Jeff Lowe. If you are in a wheelchair and you can't move and people are feeding you and they ask you, how do you feel today? Say, it doesn't get any better than this. Thank God I'm alive. So that, I think at the end of it, I would end with, then I have to run back to WHO to be abused and neglected and ignored.
Well, I'm going to jump in, Dr. Chandros, and thank you very much. I don't want you to be late for your meeting, but I want to say that your eclectic selection of examples to present your observations on human potential was just excellent. And I think everyone found your talk thought-provoking. And as I think I'd echo Brian's comment, it was to be a real pep talk and lots to think about. So thank you very much. Feel free to go off to your meeting. We're just going to wrap up with some other things here now. So thanks again. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure. The pleasure is all mine. It's just, obviously it's a topic that is of great interest to me, and to share my love for it is a great honor. So thank you for inviting me into your homes today. Sincerely. Bye.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, well, I've got the mic here, and we've got, now that Dr. Chandros has left us, I just wanted to mention that there will be the recording. It has been made, and it will be put up on YouTube in the next couple of days. And next month, our speaker, well, first of all, our meeting is going to be August 19, and our speaker will be Tim Burrows, who will be talking about electric cars. So at this point, we're going to, as we always do, hope you will stay on, and we will break out into rooms and have a 15 minutes of a breakout for the rest of the meeting.